Hey, what's up guys? I am Lefty and here we are getting started in our first lesson, which I'm gonna show you how to bring your sample into Logic, make it fit on the musical grid using some really simple techniques to kind of register the track's BPM so that it's really easy to work with. That is probably the most important thing about importing any audio into Logic, whether it's samples or loops or a full song that you wanna sample like we're gonna do. For the sake of saving time today, I am actually bringing in an 8-bar loop of another song that I have recorded of like a cover song. And basically that's gonna be a little easier to use than if you were doing a full song. But when you're picking a sample out of a full like 3.5-minute song, let's say, you just wanna find a couple little parts and then make sure they're locked up on the grid. So you can either lock in the whole song first and then chop it up, or take your little bits and then lock those in on the grid. I just can't emphasize how important it is that you do this, because it's going to be a nightmare trying to work with loops and samples that are not on the grid, and your stuff won't sound professional and tight. If you'll see here, I have a blank Logic session automatically set to 120 BPM, and I'm going to import my 8-bar loop, which is just an instrumental. You can do this with vocal stuff too. I'm not going to import here. As you can see, it has the option to import the tempo BPM info, so I can show you guys how to figure it out, because that is not always going to come up when you're bringing in audio into Logic. It happens to recognize this because it's very gridlocked already and a short loop. So here I have my 8-bar loop. If you recognize it, a classic disco record of a recreation that I made here. Well, my recreation of a classic disco record. Anyway, so I'm gonna go ahead and click on the top here and, open up a plugin on this audio track. So to register the BPM, we're gonna go down to the metering option and gonna go to the BPM counter here and add this to our track. And this is gonna read the clicks and ticks in the audio and figure out the BPM of the song. You see it kind of start to flash and work. Now it's starting to throw some numbers up there, and it gives you a very detailed number, and now it lands on 107. So it kind of starts to figure it out. You'll see it go through the process. So now we're gonna go ahead and change our tempo up here at the top of the session. We're gonna double click on the 120 for the 120 BPM and change it to 107, just like that. And now you can see it looked like my region shrink down, but actually it's really just locking into the grid because it's the matching tempo now. So the grid is at 107 because the audio was at 107 BPM. And we can lock this in a little bit more by going into flex mode, which we don't really need to do, but if you were to open flex mode, you can click on this guy here and it'll now really stay on the grid. So if I change the tempo, for example, or the BPM up here, it doesn't move really. It doesn't look like it's getting bigger or smaller because it's staying locked into the grid. So changing this back to 107, we can see we have our loop here. So shortly after, we're going to, in other lessons, take this apart and go through some of these sounds in it to figure them out and recreate the sample, because you can't always use other people's audio in your new recordings. So that's why we're doing the art of sampling here today, because you know, you can always get some cool little magic out of recreating a sample, or you can change it a little bit so you can use it yourself and kind of have it inspired by something else, which I think is always the best route to go, because you don't really directly want to rip off somebody, but maybe you can take from their styling an idea and recreate your own thing out of it. So it's kind of just about creating new ideas and bringing something new to your music. So I think we're pretty much locked in and good to go here. Let's listen with the click on real quick and make sure. Turn this down. Sounds like we're all set. All right, so now that we've got this all set up and ready to go, I'm gonna show you guys in our next lesson how we take this all apart and isolate the parts so we can relearn them and recreate it for the art of resampling.